Support for I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere comes from listeners like you who support us through Patreon and Substack. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/IHearOfSherlock and at ihearofsherlock.substack.com. And now you can enjoy some iHoes swag, mugs, notepads, and oval stickers, available in our store. Find it at ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise.
What do you want?
Hi,
Hello?
This is Publishers Clearinghouse. You're a winner.
You're a winner.
Obviously, we'll just kind of take the conversation as it unfolds, go in whatever directions that you want.
Good. Let's go.
Great.
Yeah, Rudy's here too, you know.
Yes.
Hey, Rudy.
Hey, guys. I'm chaperoning.
I couldn't keep him up in the building. The security system in the building failed.
I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 326. But I digress.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became astronomer.
In a world where it's always 1895, it's I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we interview authors, editors, creators, and other prominent Sherlockians on various aspects of the great detective in popular culture.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time.
I'm Bill Curtis. This is I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Now, here are your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder.
Oh, thank you so much, Bill Curtis. Yes, this is I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Wolder.
Oh, my goodness. And it's 2026, Bert. You sound like the new and improved Bert Wolder.
I am the new and improved Bert Wolder. Now, 99 and 44 100% pure and also contains lanolin.
And traces of magnesium.
Yes.
Yes, your magnetic personality there.
Yes.
Well, we are fresh back from the BSI weekend. We're going to be chatting about that for a little bit. We ran into, a number of people, a number of listeners, which was fantastic. I think it's great when we get to meet our listeners, talk about that. We ran into Bob Sharfman, who was on our list to speak to, and he is our interviewer today on his new book, But I Digress, The Musings of a Sherlockian Motormouth. And he lives up to his reputation, so that's a good thing. We also have events from the learned societies, that is, Sherlockian society events that are going on all and about, and, of course, the canonical couplet. So stay tuned for all of that and more ahead. We just wanted to remind you that now that you've gotten through the hustle bustle of the holidays, now's the time to take a look at what you're supporting. And if you do feel like supporting I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, well, we support you in that decision. All you have to do is go to Substack or Patreon and put in I Hear of Sherlock in the appropriate place. We've got the links in the show notes for you there. And do what you will. If you'd like to subscribe for free, that's an option. If you'd like to sign up to support us for as little as $1 a month, $2, $3, $5, whatever works, we would welcome that. And if you do an annual subscription, you actually get a 10% discount. If subscriptions aren't your way to go, maybe you actually like the feel of a cold ceramic mug in your hand that magically turns warm when you pour hot water into it? It's amazing how these things work. We have iHose mugs for sale. Check out our merch store for mugs and other items like stickers and notepads, and I'm sure there's more coming in 2026. But we really appreciate having your support. It helps us, obviously, to continue to do the show here, and we thank you in advance. So, Bert, the BSI weekend is behind us. This can be a little inside baseball for some people, so I want to make sure that we're connecting it to the external Sherlockian world. But what are some of your reactions to the BSI weekend? Or, what do you have to say about it overall?
Well, overall, it's just, I think of the subtitle of Christopher Morley's book about Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. It's a textbook of friendship. And for you and I and others who've been doing this for a great many years, it's a rare and much looked forward to opportunity to see friends from, it used to be all over the United States and now all over the world. People you never get to see and never get to see enough of and don't have enough time with. And it's become, in my early experience, as was yours with the Baker Street Irregulars, the dinner was the main event. It still is the main event, I suppose, but it stood alone on the calendar. And what had been a relatively brief BSI weekend compared to what it is today has now become extended such that it begins on the prior Tuesday for some people and ends on the Sunday. So it's moving up and growing. We may live to see it birth into the BSI week.
BSI week,
and then the BSI month. But it's wonderful. It's an opportunity to see friends, and it's all sorts of events. It's the only the BSI dinner is the only real invitation only part of the program. Everything else is generally open to people, and there are many more events that don't have anything to do with the BSI that now punctuate the weeks, and it's also a lot of independent gatherings. People just calling up and saying, "Hey, can you join me for dinner? And why don't we meet for a drink? And what are you doing for breakfast? And let's get up and do this." And
it's basically scurrying from one meal to the next with like-minded people, which is a lovely thing to do. The fact that it occurs in New York is wonderful because it means you can do other things too, other than Sherlockian stuff. Obviously, New York has lots to offer. So whether you're into something like musical theater or art museums or history museums or sightseeing or architectural tours and more, New York offers that. So there's a couple of things I wanted to specifically call out that are maybe of wider interest to people. One is the connection to New York, why it's there. Another is a connection to a place that used to be the unofficial headquarters of the BSI, that is the Algonquin Hotel. And then the third is a little closer to home, and that is with the Lunch of Steel and a tradition that you have promulgated there as the host of that lunch, Bert. So thinking first to New York, the BSI meets in New York is because, well, that's where we've always met. That's where Christopher Morley lived and worked. He lived out in Long Island, but he worked in the city, had his office there on 45th Street, West 45th, and he kind of put together this impromptu first BSI dinner as a cadre of friends, like-minded souls, people who enjoyed books and lively conversation and dining and drinking. And he brought them together in Midtown. And it stuck. And every January, or nearly every January since then, That's where the BSI has met. And if you're curious about why January, because, of all times to have to descend into the maelstrom of New York, as Louis Lapham called it, why January? Well, it's not because the hotels are a good deal after getting through New Year's. It's because that's the closest to Sherlock Holmes' birthday. We have a couple of pieces on the iHose website that we'll have a link to about January 6th and Sherlock Holmes' birthday as to why it was chosen, including one piece that refutes January 6th as the proper date, selecting instead January 5th, written by our friend Eric Deckers. So you might want to check those out. We'll have links to those in the show notes. But let's move on to the Algonquin. What's the Algonquin Hotel, and why would the BSI have a connection to it?
Well, you've really already said it when you say Christopher Morley. It's worth pointing out, Morley was born in 1890, and in the early part of the 20th century, in the late 19th century, in the early part of the 20th century, New York was really the publishing capital. The big magazines, for example, Collier's in 1903, which did The Return of Sherlock Holmes, their main offices were down in Union Square. Doubleday had its offices. So the center of publishing, the illustrators, the artists, the writers, were in New York, largely because it's a seaport city, well connected to the railroads, and had the Erie Canal, and well connected to the rest of the country. So it was a great distribution center for particularly printed material. But the Algonquin was built around 1902, if I remember correctly, as an apartment hotel. But it didn't have a great many long-term residents. That was the idea. You would be at the Algonquin for, a year or two, or several years or something like that. And the fellow named Frank Case came along, and around 1907, if I remember correctly, he has a wonderful memoir somewhere. Frank Case wound up leasing the hotel and converting it to a more standard type of hotel, because he had few long-term tenants. But it was on West 44th Street and in Manhattan, and it was right near, for example, the offices of the New Yorker, and it was right near where a lot of other publishing companies had offices and businesses and things like that. And the Algonquin became a watering hole. For lunch, you'd go over to the restaurant at the Algonquin and have a couple of drinks, because after 1933, you could get alcohol. And there, people like Robert Benchley and James Thurber and Dorothy Parker and Franklin Adams and a great many others gathered, and they became known around the shape of the table that they were talking with, over lunch as the Algonquin Round Table. And so the Algonquin became sort of large in the literary sphere, and as more people came in to attend the Baker Street Irregulars dinner, many of us stayed at the Algonquin. And since then it's gone and had quite a classic. It was a very old world. The early meetings of the Baker Street Irregulars were down on the sort of the southern side of Grand Central Station at a hotel that was torn down, the Murray Hill Hotel, that was a great remnant of the Victorian era. But in the Algonquin, certainly in our day, in the early days, up through maybe the early 90s when it changed, the Algonquin, had this sort of 1930s grandfather clock, walnut-paneled, stuffed couch lobby, a cat in the lobby, a famous blue bar. It was very, very romantic and redolent of old New York. And upstairs in the hallways, they had wallpaper with the cartoons of James Thurber, who was a great cartoonist whose work appeared in the New Yorker and other places, and also a comic author, Thurber. So, that's kind of the reason why the Algonquin became sort of a central place.
Yeah, it's still, even though it's been taken over by a chain hotel, Historic Hotels of America, under the Marriott brand, there's still some of that charm left. I mean, the lobby's been transformed to be more updated, and they've moved the blue bar into the lobby, so it feels like a hotel or an airport bar in the middle of the hotel lobby. So it's lost a little bit of that old world charm, but it still retains certain elements of it. And of course, you go upstairs, and that wallpaper still remains, and the charm of being inside of a historic building like that. And if you're interested in learning more about that time in history, Frank Case's memoir, which you mentioned, is called Tales of a Wayward Inn. And then Frank Case's daughter, Margaret Case Harriman, wrote what I think is the natural sequel to that, called Blessed Are the Debonair. And she's also the author of The Vicious Circle, which talks about Dorothy Parker and the Algonquin Round Table. So worth seeking those two volumes out from your local used bookshop. But yeah, that's the Algonquin in a nutshell. And we used to, put everybody up in the Algonquin as far as visitors from out of town, and you could hang out in the lobby and ring the table service bell to have the waiter come bring you a drink and run into like-minded souls as they breezed in and out of the hotel. To me, it was just part of the construct of the BSI weekend, and that made it so special. Now, there's another tradition that comes from that era, and you, Bert, have, I think, very elegantly employed it at your Thursday afternoon luncheon, which is dedicated to the memory of Freddie Steele. But the tradition that you have implemented is that of the use of the Grillparzer book. Now, we've talked about the Grillparzer book before, and I want to mention episode 272, Legends of the BSJ, specifically where we talked about Christopher Morley with Steve Rothman. It's worth going back and listening to that again to give you some more flavor about this particular portion of Sherlockian history. But Morley implemented the Grillparzer book, and this was almost a precursor to the BSI. Give us a quick thumbnail of what that is and how you run the process at your lunch.
Well, what it is, the Grillparzer book, is a collection of the plays of the German playwright Franz Grillparzer. Morley, we were talking earlier, a few moments ago, about the fact that New York was a center for publishing. Well, Morley was for a time a columnist for the New York Evening Post. And his offices of the Post were down, I think, near City Hall. And he was a great former of clubs, and one of the clubs he formed was the 3 Hours for Lunch Club, which was basically him gathering his friends for a lunch in Midtown Manhattan at Chris Sella's, but in the kitchen of Chris Sella's, because during Prohibition, Chris Sella had alcohol on the premises, so you could have a drink there. And they dined happily in the kitchen at Chris Sella's restaurant. On the way to one of these lunches, Christopher Morley picked up, I think for 35 cents at a bookshop, the collected plays of Franz Grillparzer. Now, Morley had been a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford and knew German. And it's a book in English, but in any case, he picked up this book, and it became sort of the record of the 3 Hours for Lunch Club. They would pass it around, and new attendees at the lunch would have to open a page of the book at random, find something on the page, and explain why it was relevant to them being there. And if Christopher Morley liked that, they were inducted as permanent member of the 3 Hours for Lunch Club with a suitable process. He would take what had been a tax stamp off a package of cigarettes and sign his name with a great flourish on that particular page, and then put the stamp on the page and do this formal induction ceremony. And that
Did he ever refuse anyone entrance?
I think if he invited you he only got there by being invited.
Yeah.
And I think if he and I don't have any memory of him reading about second guessing. Well, maybe there were people that he just didn't want to see again. I'll bet they didn't come back though. And so, that's the Grillparzer book. And then more than 20 years ago, very informally, I just gathered a literal handful of my friends who were coming from New England for lunch on the Thursday before the BSI dinner. And we did this when I had joined the Players Club, and we met in the grill room of the Players around one of those long tables. And after a while, it got a little bit bigger, and we moved to the Society of Illustrators, and then briefly to the Grolier Club, and then the Salmagundi Club. And, we've been at a pub in Manhattan for the last couple of years that works really well. But we cap it at just a handful of people because, you can't really, you want to be able to we all sit down around a long table. And even with, more than a dozen people, it's really tough to have anything that looks like a good conversation. It's just, just doesn't work. So it's really that. It's just an informal thing. But we still pass around the Grillparzer book and at least my version of it. And there we are.
Well, I think this is what I think is a lovely nod toward history and tradition while creating your own version of it to bring into the future. And that is pretty much what the BSI and Sherlockian societies more broadly are about. Obviously, it's always 1895 for those of us interested in the world of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, but we're living now in the year 2026 and moving forward with a look toward the past with nostalgia and with love in our hearts, but with creativity and with whiskey and sodality, as Christopher Morley would put it, among the people that we find ourselves surrounded by. It's a wonderful way to celebrate Sherlock Holmes and each other at the same time. Well, it sounds like we are marching into March. How about that? The second half of March, as it would be, as we look at the Sherlockian calendar. This is the Learned Societies section of the show where we give you a rundown of some of the events that are going on across the country, perhaps across the world, with respect to Sherlockian establishments. So, where do we find ourselves, Bert, on the 16th of March?
The 16th of March, we're in Columbia, Maryland for Watson's Tin Box of Ellicott City. Matt Hall can tell you more. You can check out watsonstinbox.org. They're having a dinner meeting.
Lovely. And of course, if you would like to go to another meeting on the 20th of March and you find yourself in St. Charles, Missouri, well, that's the Harpooners of the Sea Unicorn. You can find them at harpooners.wordpress.com for more information, and Jonathan Basford is your contact.
And then it's off to Dayton, Ohio on the 21st of March for the Agri-Treasurers Conference, the Holmes, Doyle and Friends. And I hope to be attending that. Kendall Potts is the contact, and you can find out more at agritreasurers, all one word, .net.
Yeah, and I understand they have a new hotel this year. So if you've been there in the past and have been less than impressed with the Quality Inn, they put the K in quality, fear no more. There's a new hotel, so check them out. Virtually speaking, on the 21st of March is the Norwegian Explorers. They've got their virtual study group. You can sign up for that at norwegianexplorers.org.
And you'll be perceiving virtually on the 26th of March. The Afghanistan Perceivers are gathering for their virtual meeting. Find out more from Brian Wilson and look at tulsa-sherlock.org for more info.
And heading almost due east from there, you'll find yourself in Baltimore, Maryland on March 27th for the dinner meeting of the Six Napoleons. Greg Ruby is your contact there. And the good news is it does not cost one black pearl to get in. It's actually much more affordable. You can find more out at SherlockBaltimore.com.
And also, the next day, there will be a luncheon meeting of the Sherlockians of Baltimore.
Oh, the SOBs.
Yes, and astonishingly, Greg Ruby is also the contact for that at SherlockBaltimore.com.
All you Baltimoreans, all you SOBs, Greg is your ringleader. On March 28th, our friends John Schinberg and Linda Crone, leading the Tourist International SS, will be having their dinner meeting in Schiller Park, Illinois, the suburbs of Chicago. You want to check them out at touristinternational.com. Oh, .org. Oh my gosh.
.org. Yeah. And on the same day, if you think by the end of March Chicago is too chilly, go to Winter Garden, Florida.
Perfect.
For a breakfast meeting of the Orange County Pips of Orlando. Eric Deckers.
Hey, we know that guy.
Tell you more, and there is a link to at the meetup that he has. If you're on meetup.com, you can look for Orange-County-Pips, but Eric Deckers can tell you more.
Superb. A great early spring, so we hope folks get a chance to get out and experience some of that. If you have an event that you'd like to submit to the Sherlockian calendar, just go to SherlockianCalendar.com. Ron Fish's email address is available there, and he'll get you on the list. We hope to see you around. Bob Sharfman has been a Sherlock Holmes fan and scholar for nearly 60 years. And if anyone has met him, you know he has a story for every single one of those years, maybe more. But Bob's not just a raconteur and semi-professional comedian, but also a successful attorney, mountaineer, street musician, and social butterfly who knows a guy who knows a guy, and a rightfully proud family patriarch, and a scholar of Sherlockiana and a variety of subjects. His latest book is But I Digress, The Musings of a Sherlockian Motormouth. It's a collection of wide-ranging essays and ramblings from many renowned Sherlockian publications over the years. Bob Sharfman received his investiture, Killer Evans, in the Baker Street Irregulars in 2024. Bob Sharfman, welcome to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I know we're going to test the limits of your memory now, but we want to know, take us back, if you will, to the first time you recall meeting Sherlock Holmes.
Well, that's a real long time ago. The first time, I can't remember the exact year, but I was probably 10 years old, and going either to a movie and seeing a short subject about Sherlock Holmes, more likely one of our first television shows on Saturday morning had Sherlock Holmes on it. And I was introduced to Sherlock Holmes through television and the movies. I think it was mainly television, as I can remember. I did not read the canon. Unlike many Sherlockians, at 10 years old, I was reading John Tunis books and the Hardy Boys, Frank Merriwell, those kind of things. I was a reader, but I wasn't a reader of any kind of serious things.
That's funny you call this serious.
Well, I think as a matter of fact, I wrote a paper. It's not in the book, but I wrote a paper that maybe it is in the book. I forget sometimes. But I think the canon is good literature. I think it's very well written, and by most of the tests that I could discern on that I've heard other experts expound upon. I think it's great literature. And as my son, who is an academic, said to me, Dad, all you have to remember is you're still talking about it 150 years later.
There you go.
That sort of answers the question.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So was there something in particular that moved you from screen to printed page with regard to Sherlock Holmes, or?
Well, I was interested in it, and but to be quite candid with you, school interrupted, and school consisted for me. I went to a trade school. I went to business school and then to law school, and did my readings that were required of me in high school. And when I got into the canon as such, was after I came to work one morning, and my partner said, I heard on the radio that they're having some Sherlock Holmes group is meeting tonight. Why don't you go to the meeting? He says, you like Sherlock Holmes. And I thought, that might be a good idea. It's on the way of the train. I'll stop in for a few minutes and see what it's about. And I did, and that was a meeting of Hugo's companions.
Ah, that's a Chicago group.
Yeah, Chicago group. It was all men at the time. And if it was still in existence now, which it's not, it would still be all men, because that's why it's not in existence now. In any event, I sat there, and I was just going to come in for a few minutes, and they said, you better go get a glass. We're about ready to drink some toasts. And they didn't have to ask twice. And I got myself a glass of something, and they started with these toasts. And I knew at first, I think the first toast was to Mrs. Hudson. I remember who that was. I knew Mrs. Hudson. And then they talked about the gallant Murray. I didn't know who the gallant Murray was. And then they talked about the Maiwan Mule. I didn't know anything about a Maiwan Mule.
You probably thought that was a drink.
Yes, that's right. That could be. And the second most dangerous man in London, Colonel Moran, everybody hissed. And so on. At the end, they toasted the needle. And I didn't know what that meant. But I enjoyed drinking the toast, so I ended up staying for quite a bit of time and met a number of people. I don't know when I met who, but I met such people at these meetings. I knew I wanted to come back because these were very smart people. And they were dealing in a subject I knew nothing about, and that it would be a good way of learning something new. And the people I met were such as John Bennett Shaw, August Derleth sold me Solar Ponds books, John Lellenberg, Eli Lebo, who was also a neighbor of mine at Highland Park. I didn't know him from Highland Park, though, but my wife was involved with his wife in some activities in town. And what a wonderful man he was. And even met some fellow named Vincent Starrett, who I wrongly thought was the editor of the book section of the Tribune, which in my eyes made him a very important person. He wasn't the editor, but he was a columnist, as you know. And I just said hello, and he said hello, and that was it. And over the years, maybe I met him 2 or 3 or 4 times, and it was toward the end of his days. Mike Murphy was there. I didn't know the importance of these people. John Naminsky, Bill Goodrich was there. He was very important to me. Why? Because his father was the president of Chicago Title and Trust, and we did a lot of business with Chicago Title and Trust. And he was a banker, and our practice was involved with banks. And so we had a lot to do with each other at the meetings, not outside the meetings. But I started going to Hugo's Companions, and really got more interested in it. Every January, on their birthday celebration of Sherlock's 100th birthday, they would come back and tell me and the rest of the group about the BSI weekend. We had a lot of people in BSI at that time. And every year I said, "Oh, that really sounds like a lot of fun. I think I'm going to go next year." And I said that to myself probably 40 or 50 times, never went. More about that later. But and eventually when somebody says, "Well, you want to stand for the tripos?" I didn't know what that meant. It says, you have to get up there and answer some questions about the canon. By this time, I had purchased the Doubleday edition. I had read it, underlined it, dog-eared the pages that I wanted to check back on. And I still have that edition, along with maybe 5 or 6 others of the Doubleday edition. And I stood for the tripos with, I remember, 3 or 4 other men. And it was just wonderful because it was their form of hazing. And everybody knew it. They knew it. I knew it. Everybody knew it. And it was just fun. And we had this fellow, Dave Levinson. I don't know if you ever came across him or not. He was BSI. And he would dress up in this outrageous costume. I wouldn't think it outrageous today. And he was Count von Ornstein, the representative of Moriarty. And he was complaining that none of us should be ever allowed to attend a meeting again. And what failures we are, it would be, and all of that. And it was done in good spirit. And we all had a lot of fun. And at the end of which we were all admitted to membership. And that practice, I unfortunately fell into disrepair. But it was a lot of, and not unlike a recent hazing ritual I went through in Baltimore. It reminded me so much of that I just loved it. And then the leader of the group at that time was a fellow named Bob Mangler, who I was very friendly with because I knew him from his bar association activities. He was a municipal lawyer. I wasn't in that field, but I knew he was at the top of that game. And we were pretty friendly. We were friendly outside of the Hugo's Companions and also the Hugo's Companions. And one day he says to me, "Why don't you come to another meeting? We have a group called the Hounds of the Baskervilles Sick." And I did, and they gave me, they made me a member and gave me a certificate that said I was a member of the Baker Street Irregulars and was signed by no less than Vincent Starrett. So when they would come every January and talk about the BSI, I assumed that I was a member of that. I mean, after all, I had this certificate on my wall, which it is on my wall right now today. And then I still hadn't gone to New York. And then it was long after that, in 2000, I forget, 18, maybe 17, 18, around there, I show up in New York, realize that the Baker Street Irregulars that's on my certificate is not the BSI, and had the time of my life. I just met such wonderful people. That's a wonderful time. And at that point, the hook was in my mouth all the way. And the rest, as they say, is history. I took up my pen and started to tell people what I thought about Sherlock Holmes and the canon. Now, if I'm not being too much of a motor mouth, of course, I have advertised that fact, and I am indeed a motor mouth. One of the rules at Hugo's Companions was that when you spoke about the canon and you asked a question or gave an answer, you could only use the words that were in the canon. Is it the Reigate puzzle or is it the Reigate Squires? You've got to use the words in the canon. And that sort of stuck with me in the beginning. Of course, I go outside of that on subjects completely skew of the canon. But when I wrote about my favorite topic, that is Moriarty's patriotism to the kingdom, all of the words that I use there, I come from the canon. There are no words that I made up. There's no facts that I take from outside. I wrote a little paper about the picnic. I thought that Moriarty, Holmes, the Holmes brothers, Mycroft and Sherlock, and Moran had at the Falls, because that was why they were there, just to talk over foreign affairs. And I even suggested the menu after doing research on Victorian picnics. And that, of course, is just outside of the canon. But the facts that Holmes was actually a member of the Foreign Service of England, all those facts come from the canon, are words from the canon. The facts that Watson knew nothing about Moriarty or Moran really does come from the canon, or they're not in the canon. And all the words that Holmes used lauding Moriarty and saying to his dear friend that to call him a criminal would subject you to an action for libel or slander, that comes from the canon. So that was pure Hounds of the Baskerville. I'm not Hugo's Companions method of discussing the canon when you deal with serious subjects. The other things are sort of whimsical and just a lot of fun.
So Bob, were you pretty much a continual member of Hugo's Companions? Because just for our listeners, Bob is talking about events that this is probably the late 1960s, early 1970s, because Starrett died in 1974.
The interesting thing about it is he signed my certificate after he died. I got the certificate after he died. He signed, I think, 5 or 7, I forget the number, of certificates and gave them to Bob Mangler. And is it Dan Fusco?
Andy Fusco.
Andy Fusco. I met him for the first time this weekend, and we had a lovely visit because he is one of those that have one of those certificates. He and I think, are the only 2 living people that still have one of those certificates. He got it, and it was after Starrett's death. He gave it to Mangler, and he said, give it to people as they come into the Hounds of the Baskerville. And you're right, it started in the 60s. So I've been around a long time, but I really didn't do much. Well, didn't do anything. Until really I hit New York. That became a serious effort.
And so what was your first paper? Your first, what motivated you to say, hey, I think I want to write this?
Well, the first things that I don't know excite me because I try to find out about learning about them. I think the first paper that I wrote, I think it is in the book, and I'm going to go through the title here. Why Henry Ward Beecher? Why did Dr. Watson bring a picture of Henry Ward Beecher, an American anti-slavery and pro-North preacher into the canon? Why did he do that? And so I sort of guessed at a few things and made up a story, because essentially that's what I am, as a storyteller. And except when I write about Moriarty, I knew that this thing about Moriarty would be people think that I'm wrong. I don't understand them. they somehow still think he's a criminal and not one of these great patriots. But I find it very hard to find. And in fact, Holmes said himself, he has never been proven to be guilty of any crime. So how can he be a criminal if he's never been proven to be guilty of any crime? So I wrote Henry Ward Beecher, and I don't know why I submitted it to the Norwegian Explorers, and they printed it in their Christmas annual. And I couldn't have been more excited about anything. I thought, wow, this is really something. I'm going to have to write something else. And that started me down the slippery slope. And I sit here talking to you, and I'm looking at some coffee cups filled with pens and pencils. And I still write with pens and pencils, by the way, on legal pads. And it's been a wonderful way of occupying my time and keeping my mind active. I learn all kinds of good things. So that was my first story. And I can't remember the order in which I wrote them, but I know I had a lot of fun doing some of them. Some of them required a great deal of research. The story about why Henry Ward Beecher was the first story I wrote and was published. There was another paper I wrote, which is not in the book, but which has been published now twice. Once in this last Christmas annual of the Norwegian Explorers, and once in the Sherlock Holmes Review, and it just came out. I don't know. I must have sent it to review, and I didn't think it was getting published, and sent it to 3 or 4 years later, sent it out there. And that was probably the paper I've done the most research on, because that was what happened to Cox and Company. And then I just did research on the different mergers. And one of the things that I did in my practice was acquisitions and mergers of financial institutions. I was involved in over 100 of them. So I knew how to research that subject. And I wrote this wonderful letter that Holmes sent to me, and it's telling me that he couldn't find any, I couldn't find any, in response to my inquiry as to where I could find some more stories about their adventures. He could not remember about what exactly happened to Cox and Company, but as far as he knew, this is what he can recall. And then I went through all of these different mergers. And right now, as I sit here, I can't remember where it ended, although I think I can't remember the name of the bank, but it's in Nova Scotia. And it's a big London financial institution. But its headquarters in Nova Scotia. So that was really, and I had so much fun researching that. Nobody ever published it. For reasons I don't know, because I did such a wonderful job at researching it, but maybe it was the fact that it was completely boring. Who was interested in a bunch of bank mergers that had something to do with it? So I attached it as an appendix to another paper, and it got published twice.
Oh, good. Well, you know, one of the lovely things about your book and about you as a Sherlockian writer is that your style, you know, is very conversational. And so your stuff is fun to read. And you make fun of this because, you know, your title includes But I Digress. And as you go through your papers, occasionally, you know, you have a comment, but I digress. But when you do that, particularly on the page, some interesting things happen. And I have to ask you about one thing that I've been very curious about. In your essay about, I think it's the one about Henry Ward Beecher, you have a little digression here. And you've done wonderful research in all of these papers, and your notes are there. So it's very useful to see what you've done here. But you say in this essay, my bookshelves have lots of writings on the writings, as well as a copy of Uncle Bernac, with a handwritten note by Conan Doyle on the flyleaf, an 1895 edition of The Adventures, And even Mark Twain's A Double-Barreled Detective Story with a cameo appearance by Holmes. And then you say, I was one of the unfortunate investors in the movie by that name. That was shown just a few times in the 1960s with the lead, Herb Hatfield.
Right.
Now, what's all that about?
Well, once I start, I just keep on going. As a friend of mine says about me, I'm the only person he knows who can interrupt his own interruptions. When I mentioned Double Barrel Detective Story, every time I hear that name, I smile, because it was a friend of my brother-in-law's who later became a very well-known movie maker. He's gone now, but very well-known movie maker and television producer. It got us involved. It got my brother-in-law involved. I think at the time I contributed maybe $200 or something like that, and that was a lot of money for me in those days. And we invested in this movie, Double Barrel Detective Story with Herb Hatfield. And we were, of course, honored to be at the the premiere, which was at the Playboy Theater in Chicago on Dearborn Street on a Sunday afternoon. And present were the investors, the family and friends of the actors, and about 20 people who just wandered in off the street. By the end of the movie, there were the investors crying, and the 20 people are long gone. And even some of the friends of the actors left. I think it's played 4 times or maybe 5. It was an immediate and total loss. And we never let the fellow that did this was a wonderful guy named Zev Brown, and Braun. And he was a wonderful man and a real friend. And we never let him forget it, of course. And so when I saw that book, Double Barrel Detective, I saw it at the matter of fact, I purchased that at the BSI weekend, the first weekend I was there. I saw his copy and nobody seemed to be interested in it. I said, I grabbed it up right away. And just recently, Peter Blau asked me if I could find the original script, the play script. So I went back to Zev's children, and they gave me a whole bunch of leads, including the president of DreamWorks. And it just didn't, no one could seem to find it. And the last effort I made was to ask a patent lawyer friend of mine if he might search through the copyright files and see if a script was attached to the copyright. But he since moved out of town, so I'm sure he's forgotten about it. Yeah, that just triggered something in my mind. And when something's in my mind, it comes out my mouth. There's no filter between the ears and the mouth.
Well, and that's interesting, Bob, because that kind of that lack of filter, let's call it your natural gregariousness, shall we?
Yeah. You're very kind. You're very kind.
There's some people that kind of behavior could get them in a lot of trouble. And my sense is that your natural chattiness probably has gotten you into more interesting places and in touch with interesting people. What kind of connections have you made? As you interrupt yourself and you go from one subject to the next, because this is about ramblings of a Sherlockian Motormouth, after all.
Yes. It is.
What kinds of ways have you maybe surprised yourself as you've been chatting with various people over the years? What are some examples?
Well, it's interesting. As you know, Scott, I'm up in years. I'm celebrating my 90th birthday in a month or two. And as you get older, things leave your mind and memory. One of those things that leave your mind and memory is your vocabulary. I would say that my vocabulary is shrunken, 20%, 30%, whatever. I find when I have a pencil or pen in my hand, my vocabulary is back. and I'm able to deal with some of these things. And I'm not a natural. I mean, I've written a lot in my life. I've written a lot of essays. I've done, kept diaries and things like that. My father did it before me, and so I come from a line of Motormouths. And but to be able to keep something on track, as much as I do digress, I try to keep it on track, and that's really been something that's come as a bit of a surprise to me, and a pleasant surprise. I've also met a lot of good facts. I've a lot of good information, a lot of good techniques. And when I have trouble, I'm not afraid to call somebody and say, "How do you do this?" I pester Rudy terribly, and he's as kind as can be to come over here and he type a few things on here, and he even is patient enough to explain things to me. So the whole process has become a real joy. I mean, when I'm not writing, that's when I feel that I'm wasting time.
Well, as one of the things you said that stuck with me, particularly before we were talking about your first article about Henry Ward Beecher, is that you love learning. And I think we see that about a lot of Sherlockians, that there's a natural curiosity, whether it's to learn about the canon or related subjects or the people we happen to be in touch with as part of this hobby. There's just, it's a community of perpetual students. And
yes.
So I guess I'm curious, at almost 90 years old, what do you do to make sure that you never stop learning?
Well, I don't stop reading. I do a lot of writing, but I do a lot of reading. Now, when I got this Sherlockian bug, so to speak, almost everything I was reading was Sherlock Holmes or Sherlock Holmes related, or mystery genre related. Although I'm not a mystery fan, but I got into Nero Wolfe, for example, and some other things. And but I do read a lot of economics. I read a lot of biography. I read a lot of foreign diplomacy, diplomatic history, which has always been an interest of mine, and current events. When I go into a bookstore, I don't immediately go to the back and ask, "What do you have about Sherlock Holmes?" I say, "What are the new nonfiction books?" And that's pretty much where I was at. And what's come as another surprise to me is that I love this fiction. I love it. Excuse me, I didn't mean to be blasphemous. This, but for those that you can edit that out. But I love it, and that came as a surprise to me, because usually I just love to read biographies. But what was interesting, for example, a benefit of being a Sherlockian, I just finished Isaacson's a biography of Steve Jobs. And Glenn Moranker was at one of my breakfasts this weekend. And we had this wonderful conversation about working with Steve Jobs. Now, where can you find somebody? Where can you be somewhere where you know somebody who actually worked with him, and and can verify or deal with the subjects that were in the book? It's beyond my wildest dreams that I could ever have done this. And here I am talking to Glenn about Steve Jobs. And he was very gracious, as he always is. And that's what being a Sherlockian is all about.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. We are, even though there are a lot of introverts in our hobby, we tend to be extroverted when we're all together, because we've got this common bond that brings us together, and we discover more about each other, and whether it's different parts of our lives or other hobbies that we're into, and it just keeps going and going and going. So it's a wonderful thing. So I'm also curious, Bob, as you think back to all of your writings, as you look at the book, But I Digress, do you have a favorite among all of these? Whether you recall it being your favorite one to write or your favorite paper to deliver in front of a crowd, those may be two very different things, you know.
Right.
But talk to us a little bit about some of the gems that stand out to you.
Well, there were several things that I remember now. I'm not saying these are the best writing examples. If I ever did anything, this would be a good writing example. But the best thing I ever did was what I just told you about, that letter from Sherlock Holmes to me about Cox and Company, because that, to me, was the deepest research I've ever done. And I was able to do it. I knew what I was doing. I was comfortable all the way through it. And so I really liked that, even though none of the publishers did. I thought that was a terrific bit. And I'm glad it got printed eventually, even though it was just an appendix. Henry Ward Beecher taught me a lot about Henry Ward Beecher. I mean, I knew about his sister. Everybody knows about her. But if you were to ask me now, who was more influential about Civil War and slavery, I wouldn't necessarily say his sister was. I would think that Henry Ward Beecher had every bit as much to do with it as his sister or anybody else. But the most fun I've had was writing the stories about Moriarty. Moriarty's, I had written the original paper and entitled it Moriarty, Saint or Sinner. And that's in the book, Saint or Sinner. And sent it to Dan Andriarco. And we started out as friends. And then he started to edit the paper. And I must admit that we did have some words, and it came out much better, all due to him, not anything due to me. And it came out, Moriarty's Great Deception, and it was printed in the Baker Street Journal. And that thrilled me more than anything. The fact that I had an article in the Baker Street Journal was just beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, here I was, just this guy hanging out, just sort of a voyeur with all these smart people. And certainly never considered myself, and still don't, in that category. I'm just a guy that's there, you know, and listening. Because I am capable of that too, but rarely. And so that really was the exciting thing, that getting Moriarty's Great Deception there, and that whole thing. And then somebody said, I saw that button. I didn't originate that button to vote for Moriarty. I forgot who. I think it was Don Isman that originally did that button. But I had a friend that does a lot of political stuff, and she was able to get me a deal on 500 of them. You need 500 of those buttons like you need another nose, but you buy it because that's the lowest amount you can buy. As I started passing them out, and people enjoyed it, and I enjoyed making a speech about this man who was being accused of crimes and was fake news, all of that, which clearly refers to present day candidates. And you know, of course, the rule is today you do never speak about politics because nobody can talk about it civilly. And I remember giving a speech to the illustrious clients and watching Steve Doyle, God bless him, I love him. He was getting, I could see the anger, because what is he doing up there? It was show and tell. And I'm telling about these buttons. And Rudy's at the back of the room with a bag of buttons, and I'm at the front of the room. And I said, okay, I appreciate it if you promote him. You don't have to give any money, just wear his campaign button. And we started passing out the buttons, and everybody's just roaring about this. And I'll never forget that. And since that time, I've had a lot of fun giving the same talk to people, but most people today are on to me. so I just give them a button. I still have some of those buttons left.
Oh, good. Well, maybe we can offer a button as a quiz prize to our listeners this time around, along with your book.
Good
idea.
That. The book should be a bestseller, and I hope it is, because I don't know how much. Being a very skillful lawyer, I signed a contract. Whatever they put in front of me, I signed it, and I'm not even sure what my share of the proceeds are. But whatever it is, it's going to the John Watson Fund. And so somebody will be able to go to the meeting next year on a Motormouth. I hope so, please.
Yeah.
My own feeling is it'll only be about $20 that'll come from it, but we'll see.
Yeah, we should tell our listeners who don't know that the Watson Fund is a effort by the Baker Street Irregulars to collect donations to offset the cost of attending the Baker Street Irregulars annual dinner for those who are financially pressed, let's say, and that's a very discreet operation. So you're very kind to donate all of the proceeds to them. You also, Bob, you're very self-deprecating about, your talent and your books, but we should tell folks that you've got 20 essays in here on a wide number of topics. The Baker Street Irregulars Go to War. Was John Hopley Nelligan real? Your Moriarty deception essay, of course. Alphonse Bertillon, Portrait of a Non-Varsity Player, and many other things, including a great title, which maybe you could tell us a little bit more about. Elsie Cubitt, Mafia Banker?
Well, she was the daughter of a mafia figure, for goodness sake. And she ended up, the story ends up, she has his entire estate. Now, what do you think she's going to do with that? She's not going to be accepted into English society. She's got to go back to Chicago and finance some nice beer making operation or something like that.
Oh, Bob, she needs that additional responsibility like she needs a hole in the head.
Yeah, right. But it wouldn't be any fun if she was giving it all to worthy causes and things like that. It would be more interesting if she was a mafia banker. So, and I'm from Chicago, so I figured, why not? The title, by the way, which I say in a book, I submit a paper every year to the Norwegian Explorers for their annual the Christmas annual, and Ray Reithmeyer always edits it, and he's a wonderful editor. And one day I walked into the annual meeting, and he comes up to me and says, if you ever write a book, you should entitle it, But I Digress. And so there you had it. I would like to say I made up that title, and I give Ray absolute credit for that in the book.
Well, Ray is he is an excellent editor. We had him on the show a few episodes ago, and he is an inspiration to those Sherlockians who know him and happen to be with him at some of these meetings. So that's wonderful that you get that. Well, yeah. I guess we have Belanger Books to thank for being, the way you would put it, Bob, being foolish enough to publish this.
They were. I didn't ask them to publish it, by the way. I did. I shouldn't say that. The year before I had this manuscript, I had prepared a little pamphlet of maybe 10 of my other papers and put it together and distributed it in the goodie bag at the BSI dinner. And I thought it cost me a lot of money. So I thought maybe the Belanger brothers would be kind enough to find a cheaper way of printing it for me. So I had this manuscript, and I brought it to a year ago, not this last one, but a year ago. I gave it to them, and I did use the word. I said, could you guys publish this for me? And he said, I'll take a look at it. It was a quick exchange. I gave him the envelope. And 2 weeks later, he says, oh, this is terrific. I think we're going to publish this. And the first words I was, well, how much, first, before you do that, how much is it going to cost me? Because I did not use the word print. I meant, can you print this up for me? But I did have to admit, I used the word publish. And Derek, obviously thought I was submitting him a manuscript for publication. And he was all excited about it. And it couldn't have been kinder and couldn't have been nicer. And it's been a pleasure working with them. And there it is. Here it is. And I have these books in hardcover and softcover. I do not have any. I think I have one with the dust cover. And I don't know if you have one. If you have a dust cover, they wrote the dust cover. And when I saw the words on the dust cover, and I said, no one's going to believe this, because they said this book should be right next to Baring Gould, Lancelot Green, and Starrett. And I called up Derek and I said, how come you forgot Shakespeare? I said, don't you think this is a little over the top? He says, absolutely not. Who am I to argue with the publisher? But I just want you to know. Those were my words. But my grandchildren think that that's terrific. And that's the important part, because that's why I did this to start with. I wanted my grandchildren to know what I do or what I did.
Well, it's a wonderful legacy, Bob. And clearly, you and Belanger Books made the right decision, because when we stopped by their table in the vendor's room on Saturday, your books were sold out.
So I was
sold out.
Right, sold out. But now, admittedly, they only had 10, and they can't, because the printer is out. But they're going to be more of them available at the Starrett conference in Chicago in October.
Yeah, and we'll have a link if people would like to buy them online and have them shipped to you. We can arrange that as well. Hardcover, paperback, and e-copy. So,
right.
So Bert and I escaped without having to buy your book. So we're doing this all blind, Bob. No, we got an e-copy, so we're very familiar with it. So, but still getting a hard copy as well, and you have to sign it for us. So keep limber.
Well, I will. At my age, just keeping upright is
well, that's good. That's good. Well, Bob Sharfman, you've been very kind and generous with your time. We love your storytelling. We love spending time with you, and we hope that other Sherlockians will seek out your work both in print and in person. Thanks for being on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Well, thank you, and you and Bert are just fabulous people and giving so much to this hobby. It's an honor being here. Thank you.
What a great character, and what a great story, isn't it? I mean, here's somebody who came into the Sherlockian world in the late 1960s, kind of almost by accident, goes into Hugo's companion, meets Vincent Starrett, and, time passes, and he winds up getting serious about all this, really focused on it a little bit later in life. And in just a couple of years, look at the network he's built and the friendships and the relationship, and now there's a book.
I don't think I can think of anyone in the BSI, and certainly out here in the Midwest, who is more beloved than Bob. He's just
or you.
No, I know that's not the case. He's just a sweet man, and he's such a pleasure not only to talk to, but just to listen to, because he has so many stories, and he's able to just get so much out of any situation, whether it's wry observations, whether it's cracking a joke, or whether it's making you feel like you've been buddies since his childhood, not even yours. It's truly a gift, and we are so lucky to be in his presence. Oh, those dulcet tones, those little plucky strings mean, well, we're plucky too. And it means we are here with Canonical Couplet. That's right, it's everyone's favorite Sherlockian quiz program, where we give you 2 lines of poetry and we ask you to give us your best guess as to which canonical story we're talking about. Now, Bert, we were around here seemingly eons ago on episode 325, and we gave this clue. 4 pounds a week when business was slow was more than worth the Fleet Street show. I'm looking forward, Bert, to your, I was going to say your best guess, to your guess for this canonical couplet.
There's no guess about it. Holmes, this is a terrific case. This is the case Holmes called the strangest case he handled. It's the one where Dutch woodcarvers sold faulty clogs in the Netherlands. It's the case Watson called the beveled foot.
Of course it was, except it wasn't.
Oh, no.
No. But thank goodness our pal Eric Deckers is at it again. He says, asombroso, I've solved it. That's Spanish, by the way, Eric informs us. I have a feeling we're going to get a whole world's worth of language instruction here from Eric before we're out. Duolingo, we are not. Anyway, Eric goes on to say, it's the story where Sherlock Holmes goes undercover as a candidate for mayor of a small town and must befriend a lion to win the heart of the zookeeper's daughter. Even as robbers try to sneak into a bank through the zoo. It's the story Watson called The Reformer and the Red-Headed League. Oh, wait, I'm thinking of the Dick Powell, June Allison movie, The Reformer and the Redhead. This is the story of the Red-Headed League. I should have realized it because Watson looks like a walrus with that mustache, not a lion. That is absolutely correct, Eric, in both cases. So that's good to know. Well, I guess the good news is we do have quite a few entries to choose from. People must have been listening as they traveled to New York and they had nothing better to do. But here we will bring out the prize wheel and give it a big spin. Going around and around, landing on number 38, and that is Jim Bennett. Jim, congratulations to you. We will have a copy of your choice of the unexpurgated Sherlock Holmes by N.P. Circum. So we'll be in touch, and please you be in touch if you've heard this before we reach out to you. And now I guess that means it's time for, the next canonical couplet. What will it be? Well, I'm thinking it will be something like this. Watson, down for breakfast, had no idea at all he'd soon be off to Paddington to answer Sherlock's call. If you know the answer to this episode's canonical couplet, put it in an email addressed to comment@ihearofsherlock.com with canonical couplet in the subject line. If we choose your answer from all the correct submissions, you'll win. Good luck. And obviously, it goes without saying, we have a copy of Bob Sharfman's book for the winner this time around. So we hope that you win it. Well, Bert, what are you doing the rest of this cold month of January?
Trying to stay warm.
Okay, that's a start. That's a start. No. Oh, good.
And,
I'm shoveling.
And you?
I'm shoveling. Yeah.
Shoveling.
I'll let you know when I'm done.
Okay.
It may not be until episode 329 at this point. We'll see.
Well, yeah.
Well, we have some dynamite programming lined up for you folks. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait.
We didn't even mention some of the people we ran into at the BSI weekend that, well, you may be hearing from on the air. So you want to stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed, signed up wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. And again, if you'd like to support us on Patreon or Substack, we do welcome that. Or just sign up for emails from us at ihearofsherlock.com. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, phone a colleague. I don't care. Tell people about I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, and check out our other Sherlockian podcast, the weekly Trifles, where we get into the minutia in the Sherlock Holmes stories. We recently were talking about Professor Moriarty. Ooh, what do we know about him? What's there to discover? And our shorter episodes, Trifling Trifles, where we talk about things just for a couple of minutes at a time. So you might want to check that out. In the meantime, I suppose this is the frigid Scott Monty.
And I'm the extremely affectionate Bert Wolder.
You sure are. And together we say, the game's afoot.
The game's afoot.
You know, I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I'm neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.